Welcome back to pixelprojectradio, the video game discussions and analysis podcast. My name is Rick, I am your host, and today is the tale of The Forgotten City, a mod turned 2021 narrative adventure game with philosophy, mystery, and history at its heart. I am extremely excited to talk about this one. Before we do, as always, I have to thank the patrons up front. The patrons are a wonderful group of folks that believe in the show, and if you'd like to be like these fine individuals, you can check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. It is, of course, never expected, but always appreciated. You can check out that link, along with many other links, in the episode's description. And speaking of the episode's description, you can also find links to my guests' content. First timer on the show, this has been a long time in the making. I'm very excited to welcome the Dog-Faced Gamer, as he is known around here, Dog for short, and I am looking forward to talking about this game with him. Dog, what's up?
Not much. That's me. I'm the Dog-Faced Gamer. We've been working on this for a while. I think we were supposed to do a podcast last October, and then I don't remember what happened with it. I don't remember I think I was sick or something.
That's possible. It could have also been on my end. That may have been around the time I decided to take a break. I can't quite remember. But it's true. We have been looking forward to this for a while, looking forward to working together for a while. Dog is famous around the Discord for having beaten all the Yakuza games up to like Yakuza 7 in like 6 months. Just an incredible feat.
Incredible feat, yes. I got sucked into those games and just couldn't put them down. Not 6 months, 6 weeks. It was a very short period of time.
I don't blame you. Those games are absolutely incredible. I've been feeling the itch myself. I stopped, I've played 0, 1, and 2, and then 7, and then both of the Judgments, which Lost Judgment for me it just blew me away. I need to get back to 3.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't even dislike 3. Like, I know we're getting to a tangent this early. I don't even dislike 3 like a lot of people do. I just I've put it down 3 separate times just because of life stuff. I just got to get back to it. I want to get back into the swing of things.
Yeah, 3's a really good game. I think probably it gets its notoriety from people who went from 2 and was like, yeah, let's go into Kiryu's a daddy. What?
I love Dad Kiryu. Here? But we're going to have plenty to talk about Yakuza maybe at a future date. For today, we are talking about The Forgotten City. If you're a new listener, first of all, welcome. Very happy that you're here. Here's how the show works. Typically, we have a precursory discussion around our histories with the game, general things such as development, thematic ideas, music, mechanics, things like that, before we get into spoilers. Now, this game is a little bit different, and very appropriate that we're programming this right after Outer Wilds, which became one of my favorite games of all time. This game is pretty similar, for reasons we'll get into. This is not going to be an exhaustive discussion. That is to say, we aren't going to talk about every single encounter, and that will become clear as to why once we get into it. But just know up front, there won't be any spoilers until we start talking about the story. However, once we start talking about the story, I'm just going to say a blanket, spoilers are all on the table, a y'all come kind of situation. So if you haven't played the game, maybe tune out once we get to that point. We'll telegraph it for sure.
So we're not going to be doing an exhaustive discussion on philosophy and religion throughout history?
Do you know who you're talking to? We can. Before we start, let's talk personal histories with this game. Dog, I'm going to kick it to you first. Did you hear about this as a mod? Did you hear about this as a game? How did you come to know of this?
So I initially heard about it as the mod, but I had no way of playing it at the time that it came out. And then when I found out that they were actually releasing the game, I got super excited about it and then completely forgot the game existed. And then I got it for free, I think, on Epic. Tossed it on and really enjoyed it. It's a great ride.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we've all been through that cycle, getting excited for something, forgetting that it comes out, especially with how far away they announce things these days, man. But I have a similar story. I had heard of this as a mod. I wasn't really into modding at that time. I had done some light stuff, like with Skyrim specifically, the Thomas the Tank Engine mod for the dragons, where you make that, and it's classic. Plays the Thomas theme. Love it. It's very good. I had never done this. That was not really like I played Skyrim almost like a comedy game for a long time, and
It works.
It does. I didn't know anything about this though. Like I hadn't heard anything about it. The way that it came onto this show was I did this is maybe some might call this embarrassing, cringy, whatever. I typed into my trusty search engine google.com, which has become useless. I typed in philosophical video games Reddit, because adding Reddit's the only way you can get reliable search results anymore. And this game came up. This game along with some others, and I had recognized the name because you had recently talked about it in the pixelprojectradio Discord server, and you wrote a glowing review about it. So I reached out to you and I said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And you said, "Yes, let's do it." And I am so happy that you put that review in there and kind of turned me on to this, because this game blew me away. It is right up my alley. I really liked my time with it, and it does a lot of things so well.
Yeah, it really does. It's especially like I love the blending that they do with God, what's the word? They blend one philosophical argument into another as you're playing through the game of various moralities and what you think morality might be. And it's just interesting. I've never known a game that's done this before.
Once we start talking about the development, it's going to become, I think, clearer why it works so well in that way. There are kind of 4 things at the heart of this game. 5 things if you want to count Skyrim, which, I mean, I think we should respect where it's due. But outside of Skyrim, the other 4 are history, religion, philosophy, and Greek mythology. Greek and Roman mythology. Or let's just say mythology, why not? Now, listeners to this show know I'm casually very interested in philosophy and religion. I was just talking about this on the Outer Wilds episode, I think. I was super into Greek mythology as a kid. Very, very much so.
Loved it.
I started reading Stephen Fry's book Mythos about the Greek myths, and I'm really, really loving it. It's reigniting my love for this kind of stuff, and so too has this game. So this was like a strike for me, like a slam dunk. A hole in one, a strike, whatever. Choose your preferred sports method, and whatever helps you win. And that was this for me. So you just said that you really love Greek myths too. Another reason that I was excited to talk this with you is this game deals a lot with religion, and you have somewhat of a background with that.
Somewhat, yeah. Yeah, so I do have a little bit of a history with religion. I was a minister for about 10 years. No longer a minister, but I took a lot from it, and I have also had a great interest in Greek history, Roman history. I was actually, when I started college, I was a history major, and then I switched over to accounting. But I love mythology. I love philosophy. I love classic philosophy. It interests me what they thought, how they thought through their problems at the time. I'm probably more in line with modern philosophy, mixture of some of those ideas, because they were very dead set on their beliefs, and that's not me anymore. But yeah, this was right up my alley, this game.
This game was also right up the alley of some of our Discord members, and they wrote in to the community forum. If you're new to the show, the community forum is a section of the Discord where I post about what we're going to be talking about, and members of the server can write in their thoughts, feelings, reviews, jokes, haikus. As long as it's succinct somewhat, then I will read it. And we've got 2 today. The first is a longtime member, first-time poster. I don't know that Jenny has ever written in to the community forum, but Jenny did, and here's what she has to say. I tried playing this game and was really enjoying it until I figured out what was going on. I screamed through the controller and haven't played since. Doctor Who fans will understand. But it has an intriguing premise and unsettling atmosphere that I still think about, looking forward to someone else playing it for me. That's what we do here.
I wonder what that moment was, because there was a moment when I was playing it that it was just like, oh, okay, that's where we're going. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah, I know. Like, I've watched Doctor Who. I've watched, I started with the revival with the 9th Doctor, the cool dad Doctor, and watched up until Matt Smith. Or no, did I watch through Matt Smith? I did watch through Matt Smith. I wasn't wild about Matt Smith as the Doctor. But which is controversial, I know. But
God,
I liked it.
how could you?
I liked it. I'm not sure if maybe I should. Maybe I'll talk with Jenny before posting this episode, see if I should cut that out. Very much looking forward to talking about it. But I also hope you play it, Jenny. We've also got Dave Jackson, who wrote in Tales from the Backlog, and here's what Dave has to say. I initially wrote this off thinking, how good can a Skyrim mod be? But eventually the reception was too good to ignore, and wouldn't you know it, I was completely blown away by the story, voice acting, and overall presentation. I won't spoil the story here, that's our job, Dave, but it was immensely satisfying, including the final confrontation. Fantastic game and lessons learned. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No notes there. That's kind of my thoughts too.
Mine as well. I didn't have much in terms of expectations when I started the game. It grew from there.
I did not either. Since there is so much to talk about within the game, let's talk some hard facts and figures. This mod was originally released for Skyrim in October of 2015. The game itself, The Forgotten City, released in July of 2021 for PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Came to Switch a few months after that, and Stadia, RIP, a year after the initial release. Full credits, you can find those on the wiki, the IMDb, or you could beat the game. Of note, this is developed by Modern Storyteller, published by Dear Villagers. Directed, produced, designed, and written by Nick Pierce. This is almost an auteur work, not quite. Art by John Eyre and composed by Michael Allen. Now we should talk about Nick for a second. Nick is kind of the mastermind behind this game, and he had a very fascinating history leading up to this. There's a no-clip documentary on this, which I'll maybe link in the show notes. I don't have it in the notes here, but if I remember, I'll link it in, that goes through a lot of this. Nick originally got into modding via Fallout New Vegas and started the mod for Skyrim shortly after it released in 2011. Then, and this is something I just watched, and I did not verify it, but it's in the no-clip, and I trust them. In 2016 or around 2016, his boss, he was a lawyer, Nick Pierce was, and his boss somehow found out about this mod, and he kind of gave him an ultimatum that said, you know, if you don't focus 100% on lawyering, you're not going to make it. You know, you got to give this up. So Nick said, okay, and he walked. He quit his day job because the mod did so well. Like, review outlets were writing about this mod, saying, yeah, this should be a full game. So he quit his job, he hired a few developers, and formed Modern Storyteller. And from there, work began on the game, and from what I can understand, it was tireless. Here's a quote from him in an IGN article, which will also be linked. He says, quote, I've spent the last 4.5 years working 80-hour weeks with no real holiday, which I guess is about 9 years worth of work. Notably without giving the impression that he is boasting about it, it says. He continues, to be clear, that's something I wouldn't encourage anyone to do because it's not healthy or sustainable. And I certainly would never allow my staff to work hours like that. Honestly, I was surprised to discover it's even physically possible, but it is. That's
wild.
Yeah, that sounds grueling to me.
Yeah. Just putting 80 hours for 4.5 years.
It's kind of the state of game development, though. It's very rarely do you hear of a game development cycle for a game that gets a lot of attention. And the teams are like, oh, yeah, you know, it was easy breezy. 9 to 5, you know, get home, take care of the cat, go walk the dog. You know, you never hear that because that's not the reality.
No, it's not the reality. But what's interesting here is this was him working those 80 hours a week. He doesn't say that he put his staff through crunch like that. In fact, he says he wouldn't allow them to do it. So that's kind of the opposite of what I think when I think of game culture.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. And, you know, the credits only have a few other folks. And I also didn't write down, you know, I never write down the full credits because, like, come on. Also, that's, you know, incentive to play the game. But there's more than just those few folks. There's voice acting throughout this, some of which is quite good. There's more than just Nick, but Nick did do the bulk of the work. So kudos to him. You're right. He did not put other folks through this. I have one other note, but I think we already mentioned it. Articles like Kotaku were talking about the mod, saying, yeah, this should be a game, and that kind of encouraged him. Aside from that, I will link the article, the interview with him, as well as the no clip into the show notes. So let's talk about the game itself. Let's talk visuals. Dog, I don't know about you, but I love saying that. Dog, I don't know about you. But it's this, when I first saw this, the first thing I thought was, this is what Skyrim would want Skyrim to look like. You know what I mean?
It blew my mind when I saw that in the show notes, because that was exactly my thought when I was playing this game was, this is how Skyrim should have been. This is what they wanted it to feel like. And for such a small team, they do a wonderful job.
They really do. It's very visually impressive. I mean, it's not, look, I mean, I've never been one to be a graphic hound that, you know, is really into the fidelity of it all. This isn't going to compete with like Silent Hill 2 remake or The Last of Us 2 remastered or whatever. But for what it is, you know, thinking PS4, Xbox One, this is what this released on, even running it on PC now, it looks really stunning. It's just, it's a beefier, prettier Skyrim. And, you know, with all of Skyrim's quirks, you still get some weird facial animations that don't quite look right, but not nearly as many. The water looks normal. You know, you can't scale cliffs with a horse like you could in Skyrim.
There are some beautiful Skyrim-ish glitches that you can do, which is how I got one of my endings.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, completely by accident, I got an ending in this game. We'll go back. Ooh. We'll go into that later, probably in the spoiler section.
Yeah, I didn't have any glitches. I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. And I suppose that's something we could talk about. What did you play this on?
I played it on my Steam Deck.
Okay.
It ran perfectly fine. Didn't have any issues with it. Looked great. Sounded great on it. Absolutely fine.
I played this on PC as well. I tried playing this on my Legion Go, and this was the first time I had like severe trouble on my Legion Go. Not because it couldn't handle it, but I was having a weird aspect ratio issue. And to be fair, it's not the game's fault. It was doing this for Paranorma Site too. But I didn't play it at all on the Legion Go. Just straight up PC. Looks great. Looks amazing. If you could play it on PC, Steam Deck, something like that, highly recommend it. It's going to look beautiful. The architecture, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. The setting of this, we should say, is in a Roman city. You know, that's the Forgotten City referenced in the title. And you're going to be spending a lot of time there exploring, which is one of the primary verb sets of this game. And it is just really beautiful what they're able to do. It doesn't have any of the washed out textures like Skyrim has. It doesn't have a lot. Well, there is a Skyrim-ass dungeon, but it doesn't. It looks much better. It feels very lived in, and it's a very pleasant place to spend what is ultimately going to be somewhere between 10 to 20 hours, depending on how much you want to do in this game. 20 is maybe a bit high, yeah. But
I can't see people playing it much longer than that. By that point, you've naturally gotten all the endings.
Yeah. I'm going to put a pin in that for like the next minute or so. There is one visual thing that I did note. There is a quirk in this game where you're going to be talking to people. That's not the quirk. That's one of the primary verb sets of this game is talking. Talking and exploring is what you do here. And every time you speak to somebody, there's a fade to black and then a fade in. It's not like a zoom in like Oblivion, thank goodness. But there's like a fade to black, fade in. It shows their character in profile. But they always have to do a turn to you, and it always takes a couple seconds. I don't know about
it's so weird. I don't know why. It's there.
It's every time too, it takes a second. Towards the end, I was getting a little bit not aggravated, but I was like, come on, because sometimes they could take a second too.
Yeah, it's not something that's going to make or break a game for you, but it is something where and without spoiling anything, you're going to be going through a lot of steps as you're playing this game, and sometimes you just want to get through that one step and you realize, okay, turn towards me, let's have this conversation.
One thing that happened to me too, and I don't know if this is a bug or not, but if the person I was trying to talk to was sitting down, they would just never turn to look at me. They just talked while they were facing forward, and it felt it felt demeaning. I felt like I was being talked down to.
You peon.
Mechanics, as I said, two major verb sets, exploring and talking. This is a knowledge-based game. Metroid Brainia, as is in the current discourse. It's not a Metroid Brainia. I haven't tuned into that discourse. I don't know what's got people so worked up. Is it just that it sounds...
I don't either.
Okay.
I have no idea.
I thought maybe it's just that it sounds silly. Metroid Brainia. It does sound a little silly.
It does.
Whatever. Outside of one or two areas, you aren't really ever doing anything more than exploring and talking. You know, you talk, you solve minor dialogue puzzles, and that's really it. There are a couple of mandatory combat sections that do feel pretty tedious. There are gameplay tricks that kind of make this a little bit easier, but there is some of that Skyrim combat in here, and it doesn't. That's probably the parts of the game that feel the most, you start to have those flashbacks of Draugr dungeons in Skyrim, where it's just hallway after hallway of Draugr after Draugr. It's the same thing. Thankfully, this game does that very little, but it is in there.
Yeah, they're not horribly long sections. They are very tedious, and it is very much super basic Skyrim-esque combat. It's not combat that you're going to enjoy using ever, I think. But yeah, at least they're short and there's not that many of them.
Right. Yeah, and when we say Skyrim combat, we mean with a bow. There's not swords and shields and axes and magic. There are technically two weapons in the game, a bow and a gun, but we'll talk about that whenever we get a little farther in. That's really the core mechanics, though. One thing, and I don't think this is a spoiler because it happens extremely early on, but if you would rather skip past this, maybe fast forward by about 45 seconds to a minute, this game uses the mechanic that Outer Wilds does insofar as it's a time loop game. You are going to be doing loops throughout your playthrough, and that's where the knowledge checks come in. You will have knowledge that you gained on a previous loop in your next loop, and that is going to be essentially how you win the game.
It does have that. There is a nice kind of almost save function to the game with one of the characters you can talk to, and they'll quicken your pace. But yeah, it's very much time loop. You're going to have to remember where people are, who you need to talk to in a certain order. I think they did a good job with it. Yeah,
I completely agree. Okay, spoilers over. If you're just tuning back in, spoilers are done. It's not really a spoiler, just a light one. But
yeah,
that's kind of the core of the game. If it feels like we're breezing past the precursory discussion, it's kind of because we are. Most of the juice of this game, the meat on the bone, is talking about the story stuff, which gets into the themes of things like religion and philosophy and how history can alter those. This is a narrative-heavy game. Not a lot of mechanics to talk about. There's not even really any there's a mechanic that you can do. You can pick something up and rotate it and observe it. And early on, there's a mystery. Somebody's missing. And I went into that person's room because I got permission because that's the kind of guy I am. I don't barge in like in Link's Awakening, Final Fantasy 1 through 6. I don't know, all of the Final Fantasies. I get permission before I go into NPCs' rooms. But I went in and I started picking stuff up and I was flipping it around with the analog stick, observing it, thinking, oh, maybe if I turn this upside down, something will fall out or there will be a message on the bottom. No, it's not that. It's just kind of there for the world building. And if you want to be a part of this world, which that's not a con, but I was kind of hoping of that sometime, picking up a vase and seeing on the bottom some kind of a message and, solving the mystery that way.
I did. I hoped for that as well. But yeah, it's just an interesting little look closer at things. That's basically what it does. You can examine.
Yeah. Not a con, but it is nice to do. As for the music and sound, I actually, for once, do not have a lot to say about the composition for this game. I don't have anything against it, but it kind of just serves its purpose and steps out of the way. It's perfectly serviceable, but it's ultimately forgettable. It does very little more than serve its purpose. And, it dictates the atmosphere of what it's trying to do well, of a peaceful Roman city, of the areas that are tense feel pretty tense. There's one in particular that happens early on. The mechanic that we mentioned in the quote-unquote spoiler part a little bit earlier feels kind of, how would you describe that? Hazy, daisy, kind of spacey, maybe. It does a fine job, but I mean, you're not going to be humming a lot of this.
No, I think the music fits the game well, but the game is much more about the atmosphere in which you're in. So they do a really good job with sound effects, and there's a mechanic to the game that we can talk about later that the game does a good job at presenting. But the music, it's forgettable. It's good when you're playing it, but it's very forgettable.
I do agree with you. It serves its purpose well. It would be pretty inappropriate to have some of the more like quote unquote epic scoring from Skyrim here. That would be really, really out of place.
Yeah.
And Skyrim also has a lot of like folk instruments, stringed folk instruments and percussion that kind of harken back ideas of like medieval, quote unquote, for towns like Riverwood. That wouldn't really be appropriate here either. And to the composer's credit, this isn't just straight up like chant music, which would also get kind of tiresome, I think.
Yeah.
There's some nice like light chanting in the, or vocalizing, I guess would be a better term, in the start screen music, which honestly is probably the most pleasant music of the game, I think. But yeah, it's fine. It's fine. As usual, I was listening to this OST as I was editing and after we recorded. I think I was maybe a little too harsh on it. I don't think forgettable is a very fair descriptor. I think it's perfectly fine. There's even some nice scoring in here. Perhaps the composer is a fan of French horn. There's some really nice French horn lines within the orchestra, and it's all very pleasant and scored well. I didn't want to give the impression that I was negative on the score or that I thought less of it than I do, so I thought I would record this little insert to put into the episode. Speaking of which, let's get back to it. I will say the voice acting surprised me quite a bit. You come into a game thinking that it takes inspiration from Elder Scrolls, and, look, I love Oblivion, but we all know how the voice acting in Oblivion is, right? With, like, those two people that did it.
What do you want, you? What do you want, you rat?
I had never seen this in the game myself, but I saw a TikTok or a YouTube short or something. I guess a voice actor, like, did a second take and they just left it in the game where they said something and then they like moved away and said, "Let me try that again." And just repeated it.
I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night. Wait a minute, let me do that one again. I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night.
I want to say that's on the the vampire path that you can take in the game. And it's not the only time it's happened. I think it happened in Morrowind as well with another voice
really?
actor. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, twice. You can't be doing that, Elder Scrolls. Come on. That's crazy. And, Skyrim's a little better about that, but you're still going to be hearing the same voice a lot. Not so here. They've got different voice actors voicing the, I don't have a count offhand, but there's 15 to 20 different NPCs that are voiced here-ish.
Yeah, probably. 15 to 20-ish, maybe a handful more. I think maybe there was more than 20, but...
I wouldn't be surprised. There are some of them just do an okay job. To be clear, they all do better than I could, but some of them stand out more than others. One of the main folks you meet early on, his name is Sentius. He's a standout to me. The very next one I wrote is kind of a spoiler, so I'm going to skip it. Galerius, who is like the broest of all bros, and I mean that positively. He's like just a stand-up dude. I love Galerius. He's a standout voice actor. And there's an assassin that you deal with kind of early on that I was kind of pleased with his voice acting performance. I thought he did a great job.
Galerius is also just the guy that never asks really questions. He's just there, and you tell him, "Hey, this is what's happening. Oh, okay, whatever, I'll go. Yeah.
He is such a pure soul. You tell him what's going on early on, and he's just like, oh, well, that sure does sound improbable, but you don't. I don't know why you'd lie to me. He's just such a nice guy. And he has that mechanic that you had alluded to that is a super QOL time saver that I think is a good thing. He's just a good dude.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody offhand that you might want to shout out in terms of voice acting that I didn't write down here?
Oh, I can't remember the name of the character, and they're inside a cave. I just can't remember the name of the character that you have to talk to. But they were pretty standout. What I like about this game when it comes to the voice acting is they decided to include lines where you're asking someone something out of order, and they'll reply to you like, I don't know how you undo that. We haven't discussed this, or things along those lines. It's interesting. I like it. But the voice acting is, I'd say it's above Skyrim. I mean, there's still going to be issues, but it's good voice acting.
Oh, totally. It's absolutely above Skyrim. And you are right. That was a really nice touch. If you, that's kind of part of the mechanic of this game. You're going to be talking to people a lot. And if you do mention something that, they aren't sure how you know it, they're going to call you out on it and say, well, don't know how you know that, but okay, I guess we're talking about that now. And it's really nice. I think a lesser game would breeze past that and they wouldn't think to cover their bases from all angles. And it's, knowing his background, this is going to sound weird to say maybe, but knowing Nick Pierce's background as a lawyer, it's kind of not surprising to me that he would look at the conversation from so many different angles and kind of plot it out like one plots out a map, right? Like no corridor was left unexplored. And to that end, the dialogue tree, as big as it is really well accounted for. He did really, really nice work on the writing.
I can't think of any moments where I would get stuck in this game if I was talking to an NPC, where I couldn't figure out what I wanted to ask them at any one time. So it's your dialogue choices are very clear. It's not Mass Effect where you think you're doing something nice and you end up punching someone in the face.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I can't remember what game I recently had that in. I feel like I mentioned it on the show where it's like, say something understanding and the thing that they said was not understanding at all. And it's like, oh my God, BioWare and its consequences, please.
Yeah, and you as the player are just like, why? Why did it looked so nice?
I'm glad that you mentioned the notion of never feeling lost. That's something that I wasn't quite sure where to put in this game, but I wanted to talk about it before we got into the quote unquote spoilers. This game gets compared to Outer Wilds a lot. It came out kind of at the same time. It came out a little after. It does a lot of similar things. And because of that, Outer Wilds was so monumentally successful that, it was a natural point of comparison. And a lot of the, sometimes what I like to do, we kind of moved away of discussing critical reception on the show. I just kind of cut that down in favor of, discussion. But one thing that I did today was I looked up Reddit threads of folks talking about this game. And a lot of people were saying that it underwhelmed them because of how good Outer Wilds is. And I think I understand where they're coming from. I love Outer Wilds so much, but this is a different kind of game. Outer Wilds is explicitly focused. It does have a story. It does have an overall message and a thematic idea, but it's focused on the exploration and the discovery, the beauty of discovery in the universe. Alex Beecham said this explicitly, like that was part of the design philosophy. This game, The Forgotten City, has a story. That is the driving device in this game. It is a story. There is a story. You ended up somewhere, you're trying to get home, and you're trying to do good in the society you find yourself in. I used "in" like 5 times. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. But I mean, this game has a story, and it's also dealing with its thematic ideas in a different way. At least to me, Outer Wilds puts those much more in the focus, whereas The Forgotten City, I kind of look at it as, it's the vehicle is the story, and the trappings are the philosophy, the discussions around religion and world history. Now, are they prominent discussions? Yes, absolutely. But this game is telling a narrative story first and foremost. I might be wrong on that. I might even listen to this when I'm editing and think, I don't know if I agree with that. But what do you think, Dog? Do you, well, I actually don't know. Have you played Outer Wilds?
I have not. I've seen other people play it, but I have not played Outer Wilds yet. I would say, kind of along what you were saying, this game is the story. It's not about the gameplay itself. The story is excellent, and the gameplay works for it. But everything about this game is going into discussions of right and wrong, who gets to decide what morality is. But it's story. So this is a narrative-driven game to a T. It is narrative-driven. Yeah, it's not really about exploration. You're going to see it's a very small map, actually. The map is tiny, but what he's able to do with the map is great. There's very distinct areas, but yeah, it's not an exploration game.
No, definitely not. Whereas Outer Wilds is. And another point of comparison, more to your point about never getting lost, really, is Outer Wilds is very, very vast. It's a big solar system, and you can explore so much. And a lot of the times, the discoveries you make pieces one thread to another, one by one. Very rarely are you going to discover something in Outer Wilds that unlocks like 4 different mysteries, or pieces together 4 different open mysteries. With the Forgotten City, it very much is that. There is a really great YouTube video. I can't remember the name, but he mapped out all of the different conversations, and very frequently one quest is going to either unlock, help solve, or elucidate 4 other quests. Everything is connected here in a way that does give it the feeling of kind of being on rails. If you're coming to this wanting a detective game experience, I can see how you might be disappointed. That being said, I think there's something to say in how focused this is. Outer Wilds, as much as I love it, can get frustrating at times to new players if you don't know where to go or what to do. It very much, I think the analogy I used was it's not breadcrumbs. It's just it gives you puzzle pieces and you have to figure out where they go. This is very much more breadcrumbing, and I think that focus helps keep the pace up. I think it helps keep the runtime shorter, which is a plus to me. It keeps the story moving, and it keeps the ideas, the philosophical and religious and historical ideas, kind of always turning in your mind. They're always waiting in the water of your brain, and you're never forgetting about them because you're always talking about it. Every time you talk to somebody, you could say, yeah, what do you think about the golden rule? And they'll talk about it. Or, so you're a Christian, huh? And then they'll talk about that. You're always thinking about this kind of thing. And, in Outer Wilds, you could go long stretches without thinking about the ideas of community or things like that. You can just turn that part of your brain off. And here it's focused enough to where, it's an option, sure, but you probably won't because you're talking about it so much. I don't know. I don't agree with those takes that this game is lesser because it's quote unquote on rails or easier. Is it closer to being on rails? Yes, but I don't think it suffers for it.
No, and it's not meant to be a hard game. It's meant to be easy. The developers wanted you to hear this story. They wanted you to understand the story by the time you got to completion. It's not a game that you're going to get a lot of replay value on. But with that said, what they do with the small world, with the intertwined tasks, with everything fitting together, is masterful.
I agree. It's really, really, really well done. I don't think one should discount this because it's a Skyrim mod. I don't think one should discount this because Outer Wilds is right there. I don't think that's a fair comparison at all. It really is masterfully done. I hope Nick Pierce is making more games. I don't know what Modern Storyteller is up to right now. But if they decide to make something else, I'll be there. I maybe not day one, but week one, month one, I'll be there. They've earned my trust.
Definitely.
One more thing we should talk about. Generally, we do this kind of thing up top. My fault, but one more thing we'd be remiss not to talk about before the spoiler section is the idea of the golden rule and the kinds of conversations you're going to be having and thinking about in this game.
The golden rule, not to be confused with what we would call the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Kind of there. It's very strange. Trying to think of how to describe it without spoiling. I'm at a loss.
Yeah, that's the tough part. It's based on the golden rule as we know it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It is based off of that, but it takes a few steps forward. It skips a few rungs of the ladder, LADDER, into this concept where, yeah, I guess this is kind of tough to talk about without spoilers, huh? It gets into the nitty-gritty of what is morality, who gets to decide morality, and do you think you know better than what the textbooks or history might tell you? That's we're really tiptoeing around here. Eggshells galore, huh?
Oh yeah, and it deals with outer morality and inner morality, what people are presenting to the world versus what they're thinking to themselves. It's going to be interesting.
It is going to be interesting. And if you know anything about, Roman or Greek history, you know that at a time, Romans did not look too kindly upon Christians. We associate today the golden rule with, I think it's safe to say we associate that with a Christian morality lens, right? Do unto others. Jesus said, treat your neighbor like you would have them treat you. That is, that's how we associate it. And you would be on the right track if you thought Romans weren't Christians. Very true. And that's a part of this history and the rewriting of history through by the means of those around, vis-a-vis those around. That is a key part of this game, and seeing how cultures will borrow from those that come before. Really, really major part of this. It's a little tough to talk about without spoiling anything, and I want to stay true to that part of the show. It would be very easy to just throw the spoilers off and have a conversation, but that's not the format I've created here, and for better or worse, God damn it, I've got to stick to it. I'm speaking as a Roman, so that wasn't taking anybody's name in vain. But we also mentioned philosophy as a key part of this, Greek philosophy specifically, and there are two schools that are mentioned and explicitly name dropped here. That is the Stoics and the Socratics. The Stoics in particular are name dropped quite a bit. There's one character named Horatius who identifies himself as a Stoic, and that man is just as well read as anybody. He could drop quotes from the masters all day long. He's, as Seneca once said, or as Cicero once said, as Marcus Aurelius once said, he does this the whole game. It's pretty funny. Like, I appreciated it, but it's pretty funny.
And I love ancient Stoic literature, so I have a copy of the Enchiridion that I read through at least once a year. But I really enjoy Stoic philosophy.
It's really interesting. I was just watching a video about how the quote unquote bros have kind of overtaken Stoicism and sort of misrepresent it sometimes as like broicism is what I've seen it called. There's a great YouTube channel called Unsolicited Advice with a British fella named Joe Foley. Really, really well done work. But one of the cool things about the Stoic philosophy is that, the blanket term Stoicism isn't always accurate because they didn't necessarily agree with each other all the time. It really was, I think how Joe puts it, is a group of interconnected people that had similar ideas and kind of knew each other and interacted with each other. But just because you like the works of Epictetus, for example, who was a former slave philosopher that dealt a lot with freedom, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to vibe with, with Cicero or with Marcus Aurelius or whomever.
Marcus Aurelius was the one that was popping into my mind with that, because those are two contrasting lives, and they do not agree on all things, and it's interesting in the ways that they kind of come to the same conclusion on a lot of stuff, but from very different backgrounds.
I admit I have not read really almost any Stoicism. I have a couple works of Epictetus and Seneca on the shelf. I haven't touched it. Man, I mean, the thing with philosophy is even the easier, quote unquote, easier stuff, like the Stoics, like Plato, the works of Plato, the stuff that's digestible, it's still not something you could speed read. You know, I see folks, and I'm not calling anybody out. I think if you're reading, then you're already doing great. But, you know, I see folks saying like, yeah, I've already read 30 books this year and it's only April. And it's like, how deep are you reading? You know, one wonders. And again, I'm not calling anybody out, but you can't read philosophy like that, you know, and well, maybe if you're at a very high level, but it's meant to be chewed on and thought about. So, and I'm a slow reader anyway. So all this to say, like, I haven't read a ton of philosophy or as much as I'd like to. What I have read is the second school that is mentioned in this game quite a bit, and explicitly through the quote unquote boss battles, the Socratic philosophy. And that's not surprising to me because lawyers, at least from what I've heard, they actually do study, you know, Socrates and the Socratics, this area of Greek philosophy, because it's where logic was born. Logic in the philosophical sense is written out at times like formulas. And lawyers deal in this stuff. So it's no wonder that Nick Pierce, having written this game, was so versed in this and was able to write things down, you know, as they were. The Socratic dialogues, you know, there's a joke with a meme with the Socratic dialogues where it's like, you know, philosophy should be a conversation, and the conversation is Socrates, and it's a huge wall of text. It's so much text you can't read it. And then the second person says, yes, Socrates. And then there's just another wall of text from Socrates, and the next person says, of course, Socrates. And like, to be fair, if you read the Apology from Plato, like the last days of Socrates, the Apology, yeah, that's what it is. It's Socrates just going off and off and off, and everyone's like, of course, Socrates.
Yeah.
but you do that. That's how the quote unquote boss battles are in this game. There's one in particular, you speak with a philosopher, a self-described philosopher, and he's like, you know, I haven't got to talk to anybody. I'll tell you what you want to know. Just have a nice philosophical conversation with me. And immediately he does a Socrates thing where he's like, do you think you know the difference between right and wrong? Immediately. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is straight out of the last days. And you have to go through this sort of dialogue puzzle answering his questions. And like you said, Dog, it's not hard, you know, and if you pick the wrong thing, he does what Socrates would do. Well, you think you know right from wrong, but how can one define such a thing? Is it your definition or is it mine? What about other cultures? And it'll just loop you back to the start and have you choose again. But what did you think of this? I was grinning the whole time. I loved this so much.
I was too. And that's the character I was talking about, the voice acting for. That was a standout for me. But it does. It just jumps right into the Socratic method. And you can mess up, but it doesn't really hurt. It just takes you back a little bit. But yeah, I really liked that section. And it goes into what we were talking about before. What do you call morality?
Yeah.
Like what is right from wrong?
Yeah. And this game, you know, how best to put this? I'm going to make a comparison that I might regret. So don't come at me in the Discord. This kind of reminds me in some ways of like BioShock Infinite, or not BioShock Infinite, BioShock 1, where it's not a political game. It's not a game about politics, but it uses them quite a bit. This isn't a game about philosophy, but it uses it quite a bit. And it's going to challenge you to think about things like, do I know the difference from right and wrong? Is what I consider to be a sin truly a sin? And even if what I consider to be a sin, even if I am grounded in that fact, can I look at those who have come before me and see their point of view? And that's a major part of this game. I mean, you can go through this without thinking about that, sure, but I think you'd be missing a lot of what this game has to offer and a lot of what makes it special. And it's not hidden. I mean, I think you would have to try not to engage with it. It's not hidden, but that's where this game really shines, is if you take a second and say, do I agree with what my player character is saying, or am I just clicking answers to get to the end?
It's all straight in your face. Like nobody is trying to hide anything. Well, I can't say that, but the arguments that they're making are very straightforward and very easy to kind of flow along. There's times where if you're asked a question about morality, well, your instinct is to go to this one section, but then you're like, but let me think about that, because maybe the first jump is not actually what that should be, or what I even believe morality is.
There's also, I mean, morality comes into play with the philosophical discussions, like with the philosopher, but it also comes into play with an early conversation that I think it's fine to tease out when your player character is talking to a guy named Sentius about, like, what is a sin. You can levy all these, I don't want to call them accusations, but you're like, well, didn't the Romans, give less rights to women? How is that ethical? And he'll say, well, of course, but with that comes the right to be protected by the husband and the male family members, the right to stay home and not have to put themselves out in the workforce. Like, and things like that. Well, I have it all written down in a little bit. Things that are priming you to try to think away from your contemporary lens, which every single one of us has a bias towards by nature of us being alive. That's how that works. And I just eat that shit up, man. I really do. I love stuff like this. Am I an amateur at philosophy? Yes. Will I always be? Absolutely. Is that okay? Yeah, because even if you only read like 2 philosophy books in your life, that's still 2 more than a lot of people, and it's still enriching you to think in a different way and from a different point of view. I don't know. I don't want to go off on a huge tangent, but I just want to say I love it, and then I want to pass the football to you.
Well, with that, we have to remember that what was moral to one generation is seen as immoral to the next. Mm-hmm. And this conversation that we're having right now, I feel is completely moral. I feel I'm a fairly moral person, but in 100 years, someone may come in and look at this conversation and say, oh my God, those immoral, awful people had no idea what they were talking about. And that's not to say that morality has not gotten. There are strides that we have made in terms of collective morality. But to look at a past generation and say, oh, that has to be immoral, this game will then go, well, yeah, that happens, but this is why it fits into the culture of the day, and it's not seen as immoral to any of them.
Absolutely. And I think, Outer Wilds does this a little bit too. I think this game isn't wagging its finger at you, the player, and saying, oh, aren't you foolish for thinking that you're so moral? I think it's more so sort of coaxing you into thinking, we should be reverent of those who have come before, without whom we would not exist. We borrow and learn from all who come before us, every one of us, from the individual to the collective. And we should be respectful of this, and not cast out the past, but rather learn from it and hold it in a place of reverence. This is something I've done a 180 on this in my life. I did not used to think this way. I used to think like, leave that shit in the past. The future is now, old man, and whatever. Now I don't know what triggered it. Maybe this is just part of getting older, but I really think that the past should always be treated, not gingerly. That's not the word. I think it should be held in delicate hands and viewed at with a lens of respect, even if not so respectful things happened. Does that make sense? Like I don't feel like I'm explaining myself very well here. Do you know what I mean?
It makes sense to me. I mean, I think that in some ways we've all gone through this period of time where you hear the story of someone from the past and you think, wow, that's a great story. And then you find out something about that person. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe that I actually respected that. Well, the idea that you initially read, you respected. You didn't respect every single thing that that person was going to do. And I think when we look at past morality, there are times where you can say, okay, this is definitely a good thing that was done, and still admit and accept that there were also great evils happening at the time as well. A person is not black or white when it comes to moral decisions. An immoral person can make a moral decision on accident. It's hard to describe, I think, what we're trying to say here exactly. It's not accepting that they were moral people, but accepting that they believed they were moral people, even given their culture of the time.
And that morals are ultimately man-made.
Yes.
Morals are created within and decided upon within a society. Going back to the example of Sentius that we'll talk about here in a few moments, another example that your character can say is, well, don't you all have slaves? And he says, well, yes, but prisoners of war would otherwise be executed. We are allowing them to live, right? Or don't your people watch blood sports? And he says, well, yes, but it's entirely voluntary. They're looking for honor. This is what fulfills them. Of course we would allow this. It's their choice. And it's highlighting the idea that our contemporary morals and what we value as being ethical is only such because we have decided it. And as you said, not just a few moments ago, in 100 years, culture will shift. And some of the things that you and I, Dog, and listeners do or say will probably be looked at in a different way. And it's up to us to decide whether we wish to hold on to this and refuse to grow with the society, or, in my opinion, do the sensible thing and move with the society and say, okay, the collective ideals have changed, and so too must I. Fix your heart or die, as David Lynch, R.I.P., famously said.
Oh, that hit hard. Can't believe David Lynch is gone.
I know, dude. Oh. I know. What a singular mind. Well, on that note, I think it's about time we talk some stories. So this is where the meat of the spoilers are going to come into play. This is not a linear game, so all spoilers are going to be on the table here. If you're tuning out now, we're happy that you stuck around. Check out the notes. Check out the episode notes for links to both of our stuff. We're going to talk all about that at the end of the episode. With that, let's hear the tale of the Forgotten City. Okay, opening. This is the opening act. You play as a bodiless POV character, except for your forearms and hands. You've got those. But you awake mysteriously on a riverbank at night with no recollection of how you arrived there. A young woman is the only person in your sights, a stranger to you. She's there around a campfire. She's thankful to see you. She's thankful you're okay. She says that she dragged you out of the river and onto the bank, presumably saving your life. We are on the Tiber in Italy, and there's a brief getting to know you section where you choose your background, and you get to choose your player's sex, male or female. You also get to choose one of 4 different, what would you call these, attributes?
Yeah, that's probably the best way to describe it.
Now, these are not as big of a deal as they seem, but there are 4 of them. There's archaeologist, soldier, fugitive, and amnesiac. And each of these get some little buffs. So what did you pick on your first time around?
I'm fairly certain I picked archaeologist.
That's what I did too. The perk of archaeologist, it says that it'll tell you insights about the world. You can understand Latin before entering the city. You get certain world building elements within the city. There's not a lot of these. Not often do you get to call upon that perk.
I'm trying to think of a time where I used that, actually.
It's very rare. There's a couple of things you can examine as you're walking around and a few conversations where you can talk about Rome, but and then of course, of course the beginning too with the whispers. But other than that, there's really not a lot. Fugitive, you move 25% faster. That's pretty standard. Amnesiac, for some reason, you just forget that you're fragile, so you have more health. That's pretty cool. This last one, Soldier, is what I started a second playthrough on. You get a gun that you get to take into this Roman city, and you get 10 bullets. You cannot get more. You get 10 for the whole game, but you can shoot people. This is also particularly funny because it replaces your flashlight. The gun just has a flashlight on it. So as you're walking around the city with a flashlight, you're pointing your gun everywhere, and it's very funny.
I may have to try another playthrough with the military background.
It's so silly. You don't even need this throughout the game. For no reason would you need a gun as a weapon.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking of one of the quests that they give you when it comes to the bow is like, this is just, we have to have this bow. It's amazing. And like, if you're carrying around a gun, I don't think.
This woman who's around this campfire, you can goad her into telling you her name. She's very reluctant to tell you what her name is. She eventually tells you her name is Karen.
Sorry if I sounded cagey. It's just that I don't always get the best reactions when I introduce myself. My name's Karen.
Now, I don't know how you felt. I called exactly what was happening immediately after this happened. Well, actually, before this happened, I looked around and we're on the river. There's a woman here. She says that she caught us in her boat and she brought us up onto the shore. I kind of knew what was going on from the very beginning, and that wasn't disappointing. It gets revealed very quickly, which I thought was a little disappointing, but you're shaking your head. Did you call this from the start too?
Yeah. As soon as you got her to say her name, Karen.
She also
like, okay.
She also has some throwaway lines. She says, like, sorry, I was reluctant to tell you about that because, like, my name has a negative connotation. And it's kind of funny, the writing in this game, you can say, oh, yeah, because of the memes, right? And she's like, yeah sure.
And I think a lot of people would think that, like if you're not well versed, or not even not well versed, but if you're not versed in philosophy or Greek mythology, more specifically with this, I wonder if you would catch it at that point.
I think, that's a good question. After how successful the game Hades was, I think more people probably caught this than maybe we're giving them credit for.
That could be.
I'm trying to imagine my mother playing this. I don't think she would catch it. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think my dad or mom would catch this at all.
She has another line where she says she's stuck in a dead-end job. And at that point, I was like, yeah, this is exactly what's happening.
Oh, there's not much to tell. Feels like I've spent my whole life in a dead-end job with an endless commute. Know what I mean?
We learn that pretty soon. But what she does is she says there's somebody else in these ruins. There are Roman ruins nearby. You can turn around, you can look. Somebody's in there. His name is Al. He went in. He hasn't come out. Can you please go get him? You know, you can ask her questions. She gets a little testy if you don't go in right away, but eventually you do. Perplexingly, as we go into these ruins, we start to hear a whisper. It's in Latin, unless you have the archaeologist perk, in which case you can hear it. It's generally just coaxing you further and saying very cryptic things that we don't quite understand. At the entrance of the ruins, we actually find a note of Al's. Just in case the audio isn't isolated well, I'm going to read it if I can't put it in myself. Here's what Al's note says. If you're reading this, it means I've discovered the entrance to an ancient Roman city hidden deep underground. Its existence is long forgotten and all knowledge of it lost, except in the Latin inscription here. It reads, "You who wish to enter the city, step forth and be judged. The virtuous shall be rewarded with eternal life and paradise. The wicked shall find themselves showered in gold, but in vain, for this shall be their final resting place." Could an underground city have remained a secret for all this time? Could people have survived down here against the odds? It seems there's only one way to find out. If I'm not back in an hour, I'm somewhere on the other side. Consider this an invitation or a warning. Very ominous.
Yes. Ominous in another fashion in that Al is one of the worst voice actors in the game.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I did not like Al's voice acting.
He kind of just sounds like a guy, you know?
Yeah, he doesn't, like, it's not a memorable voice. It's just kind of like a guy just talking. But I do like the The virtuous shall be rewarded with eternal life in paradise. The wicked shall find themselves showered in gold, but in vain, for this shall be their final resting place. I like the idea that people might want to be showered in gold, but that it's not actually going to lead them where they want to go.
No, if you know anything about Greek mythology, it is... If you know anything, you know that they're fucking and that they are always up to hijinks. They do wordplay to trick others quite a bit. They're tricky and horny, but and that will come into play.
Very horny.
Yeah, there's a lot of incestuous relations in those early Titans and etc.
Yeah, it's nice to know that we were help me step broing even all the way back then.
Some things never change. We have become as gods. Speaking of gold, though, golden statues are here everywhere. They're in various states of panic and unrest, although some are a little more casual. Some are praying. Some are fearing for their lives. Pretty quickly, you can figure out what's happening here. When you walk past them, you hear grinding. And if you turn around, you can see that they're looking at you, like they're turning their necks. They can't move, but they will follow you. This might be a bug, but sometimes if they're in your peripherals, you can watch their heads move. I don't think that was intended, but...
I don't think it was intended. It's definitely creepy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This game has like 5% horror DNA.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, maybe I'm getting the Doctor Who reference from earlier that was said.
Okay.
Have you seen the episodes with the weeping angels?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Where if you turn your back on them, then they can come at you.
Oh, yes. Okay. Don't blink for those interested.
Yeah. So maybe that's where the Doctor Who connection was from earlier. But yeah, you always wonder what they're doing, and you hear their voices. So I know that I chose archaeologist now because I could understand them. I'm not well versed in Latin or versed at all. But,
A2 dog?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear a voice. At this time, it's not really clear what the deal is. Like you could, one character says later, like everybody sounds the same when they whisper. And I kind of had a moment where I was like, oh, that's more true than it's not. You know, people do sound pretty similar. You don't really know what the deal is right now, but you do hear whispering. It's in Latin, unless you chose archaeologist. But you find Al eventually. He's hanging like by a noose. Also, and he's the only one in regular clothing. That's how you know him. And he's gilded. His body's turned to gold. And he has a suicide note that you can pick up. He was very traumatized and at odds with his situation down here. He says, here there are only two options: death or that godforsaken door to the past. Better to end it all now than find out what awaits you beyond that portal. He also talks about, like, I really tried to set things right. I really tried. He mentioned something about over and over again, like a pattern, perhaps. Not really sure what that means. What we do know is that we are going to enter that. We are going to find out what awaits beyond that godforsaken portal. That's where we're going. And when you step into that portal that's here, there are human remains outside of it, by the way. It spits you out in a Roman city. So, like, what was your first reaction to this? Were you expecting this? I wasn't.
I wasn't. It's very much a Wizard of Oz type transition. You go from its ruins. It's just everything's destroyed. There's the hanging dead body. You walk through this portal, and it's this bright, sunny, beautiful city that you see before you. It's pretty jaw-dropping the first time you do it.
Yes, the first time you are filled with wonder, just awe. It is awesome in the sense that it is full of awe, you know? Not awful. Awesome. I really got to read linguistics more, man. If I'm going to try and do this shit, I got to know what I'm talking about instead of just throwing stuff out there. You get spit out into the Shrine of Proserpina. Proserpina is the goddess of springtime, and I think one of them of fertility. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Quick thing here. I don't know about you. I am probably going to go back and forth between the Greek and the Roman pronunciations just because I'm more familiar with the Greek. This game tends to use the Roman. Just as a quick primer, Zeus and Jupiter, they're the same. Hades and Pluto, they're the same. Proserpina and Persephone, they're the same. Is that everybody? Hercules and Heracles, that's not too hard to figure out. I think that's all the main ones. One thing that's interesting is, at least in the versions of Hades and Pluto, Pluto is kind of a different god than Hades. Like it's the same god, the god of the underworld, but they added more character and merged other characters with Pluto. Dispater, the god of riches. That's how Pluto is known. Whereas Hades, I don't think Hades is really known. It's very cool. Read Mythos by Stephen Fry. It's amazing. But let's keep moving on. You immediately meet this man named Galerius. He's just dressed in a standard like white kind of short toga. He's a bald guy. He's pretty jovial, and he says, "What are you doing in that shrine? You shouldn't be there. What's going on?" And you could say, "I'm lost. I don't know." And he'll kind of let you through. And he says, "Hey, I'm going to do you a solid. Most people are kind of confused when they get here." And you're like, what does that mean? But he's going to do you a solid. He's going to show you around town because the magistrate, it turns out, wants to see you. We have some things we've got to explain to you. Right away, he says, just as long as you're wary of the golden rule, everything will be okay.
But listen, most folks seem a bit confused when they get here, but you seem very lost, and in more ways than one. So let me make this nice and simple for you. Live by our law here, and we'll all get along just fine. Not laws, law. There's just one, the golden rule, and the punishment for breaking it's kind of horrific. But our magistrate insists we take all newcomers to see him, so I guess I'll let him fill you in. So then, you coming?
One thing that I thought was really interesting is that you can ask Galerius, like, how do you understand me? I don't speak Latin. Or like, I think you say, how do you speak English? And he's like, I'm speaking Latin, and so are you, even though it's got a weird accent to it. Little thing that I thought was cute. I liked that.
Yeah. You're implanted with one of the fish from Hitchhiker's Guides to the Galaxy when you get there. The fish in your ear.
I've never read that.
Oh, I love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
It's one of those things where every so often, kind of like Hunter Thompson, every so often I'll hear somebody say, like, if you didn't read it at a certain time in your life, like at a certain age, it won't hit as hard. And I always put it off for that reason.
I think it probably still works. It's juvenile at times. I would say Hunter S. Thompson is probably much, much worse.
Yeah, yeah.
I read some Hunter S. Thompson a while back, and you can just tell that guy's living a life that I would never want to live.
Yeah, I should have read Thompson and Jack Kerouac whenever I was like mid-20s. I think for now, I'm going to have to let him go. At any rate, Galerius walks you around. He kind of shows you around. He shows you the fields, the city. You get a kind of lay of the land. You don't have a map, which is something that some folks might get a little testy about.
It's confusing at first. It's not bad once you get the city down.
If you're trying to find a specific person that's not active in a quest, which might be the case, like I was looking for somebody named Equitia to start an election, which we'll talk about. That's not marked with a quest. That gave me a little trouble because they wander, but it's not a huge deal. You get the lay of the land pretty quickly. But he takes you over to the magistrate's place, Sentius. And Sentius is going to give you a lowdown of the golden rule and why you're here. So we already talked about the golden rule, I suppose, so why don't we talk about it a little more? Like you said, Dog, if anybody sins, the collective whole is punished. The many shall suffer for the sins of the one. All citizens will be turned to gold, just as the citizens of the past before them. You look around, you see all these golden statues, and this is when it clicks, like, these were real people that were gilded for their sins, and we live amongst them. How harrowing is that?
It is a mind-blowing moment when you realize that these are actually civilizations that have come before you. And it just brings into play how horrifying a world to live in, where you're just told, if anybody sins, the collective whole is punished. So any one of your friends or neighbors could at any point do something that completely wipes you all out.
And this is part of the philosophy of ethics that comes into play very early on. Because as Sentius is explaining this to you, He says this. He says, consider the miraculous community we've built here over the last 7 months. 7 months only. 22 complete strangers. You were right, 22. 22 complete strangers.
Yeah, I was right.
Brought together by the fates, living and working together in our own little paradise. And in all that time, not a single sin has been committed. No fights, no theft, nothing. Have you ever witnessed something so extraordinary as a city without sin? And you start thinking immediately, if you're under that sort of, I mean, this is utopia, right? If they're living in a utopia, if they're living without sin, everybody's getting along, it's a utopia. Is a utopia worth it if the threat is the ending of life?
Yeah. And no, I don't think
I was going to
is.
say, I was going to say, please elaborate.
No, I do not believe it is.
Just as an example, just as an agent of conversation, I'm not saying this is, the game doesn't try to say this. I'm not saying that I'm saying this, but what you could then extrapolate it out to is, how is that different from how we're living today? There are certain sects that believe that if you live a life of sin, you suffer eternal damnation. How different is that really from how they're living here in the Forgotten City? It's physically different, but is it different on a grand scale?
I think it's different in that it turns the N-word out. So what you personally do with religious ideas today, what you personally do can send you on that path to damnation, but your action isn't going to cause your neighbor to go into damnation as well. Whereas this is, if anyone sins, everyone is damned. Right.
It's collective. It's taking that sort of idea, damnation through sin, through lack of virtue, and it's amplifying it to a point where it's not, parody is not the right word, but it's so exaggerated because it's trying to make a point on all of this. And this is also where you can talk with Sentius about the nitty-gritty of morality. We kind of already talked about this a little bit, don't you guys have slaves? Well, yes, but otherwise they'd be executed. We're giving them life, that sort of thing. Don't you persecute Christians? You can ask him. And he says, do you mean the cult blasphemers that burnt down half of Rome last year? Yeah, no wonder people don't like them very much. That's a particularly interesting bent because that commentary is throughout here, but it's never highlighted. The point of this game isn't a commentary on Christianity, but very often they do refer to Christians as cultists that do heinous acts like this. Historically, I'm pretty sure it's accurate.
Yeah, at the time, Christians were labeled as kind of the terrorist of the day, and for good reason in some ways. But also they had a lot of stuff that was blamed on them that they had nothing to do with in order to vilify them more. We do that today. We have a lot of that in today's political sphere where people are villainizing others just to make what they do look better, and to give people an other to hate. That's another thread that's gone throughout human history.
It's a sort of sub-theme of this too. For as long as we've gone on, civilization through civilization, generation through generation, we're really not so different from those that came before. This was, the same stuff, the same follies that we do today has been happening for a long time. This is why reading is so important, and everybody should do it, because you see these patterns, and then you look at what's going on Facebook in your hometown's free speech group, and you're thinking, oh my God.
Yeah, those people aren't reading much of the good things.
So you might be asking why you're here. Sentius tells you that he brought you here. He says, I believe somebody is going to break the golden rule. He never really elaborates on why. He just says he's heard rumors and rumblings. But he thinks somebody's going to break this golden rule. So he cast a ritual. He found a ritual in the Shrine of Persephone, the Shrine of Proserpina, that takes the life of the caster. It requires a sacrifice. That was the human remains that you saw outside of the shrine when you came here. He cast that to open a portal to bring you back into time. And he's saying that he needs your help because, one, he hasn't really made a lot of friends around here acting as the magistrate. And, indeed, he doesn't think he's going to be reelected at the election later today. And two, he's been thinking about this problem for so long that he's just he's diminishing returns, right? We've all been there. We need a fresh set of eyes or a good night's sleep, a week off, something like that. Plus, I mean, you being a fish out of water gives you the perfect excuse to go around and ask people to tell you about themselves and what the heck's going on here. Tell me about your society. Tell me, where did you come from? It gives an in-game diegetic excuse to do that, which, good, thumbs up.
No doubt. This game wants you to believe certain things from the outset. I feel like sometimes they overdo it a bit in their foreshadowing.
Oh, interesting.
Especially when you're talking to Galerius and he mentions it's only been 7.5 months, I think is what he says. But then he talks about how he's thought about this problem and tried to work through this problem longer than it's been productive. Which you think if this civilization's only been around 7.5 months, what's going on here? How does this guy feel that he's gone through that much time?
If I want to be charitable, I try to steel man as much on this show as I can. If I want to be charitable, the stakes are life and death. They will die.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And it's kind of getting into that idea that's been around forever that humans are rooted in, call it what you want, selfishness, sin, whatever. Humans are predisposed to behaving in ways that we might see as immoral. Now, there's a whole discussion about how our concept of morality comes from a Christian lens. Nietzsche wrote of this in Beyond Good and Evil. I get it. But for the purposes of this conversation, you all know what we mean. I think if we're being charitable, we could say that. I'm with you, though. It is like they are setting you up. They are placing every stone on this bridge in a way that some people might find that's a little over forecasted. It worked for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think with me, by the time we got past Karen, this stuff stuck out more to me when I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. Okay, I'm kind of getting what you're putting down, game, but maybe you didn't have to shove it too much. But yeah, choosing a Karen at the beginning was...
So that's the gist. That's why you're here. You have to help us figure out who's going to break the golden rule, stop it, so nobody gets turned to gold. And that's it. And Sentius, one thing that this game does extraordinarily well is it, like you said earlier, it guides you in a way that you're never lost. If you follow the quests that you have active, you will complete every single one. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And he gives you the first one. He says, if you don't want to explore, if you want to just get right onto it, he says, I would check out the Shrine of Apollo. There's somebody in there named Lucretia. Now, two things right away. One, you can talk to everybody around town. Their stories are all kind of similar. They play out the same way. There's some sort of excitement, like maybe a fire, an argument, theft, some kind of excitement like that. They end up blacking out, and they wake up on the riverbank. Somebody drags them out of the river, just like you. Somebody in a boat or a ferry. Same thing every time. Everybody mentions they can't remember, and a lot of people mention outright a coin. Just throwing this out there because we're going to talk about it. You might also be thinking, too, if the goal is to prevent the time loop, Sentius will explain that to you. He says, if you prevent the rule from being broken, I'll never need to summon you. If I never summon you, that creates a paradox. You go back to your own time. I'm thinking if it creates a paradox, then then I die. But, my head breaks whenever it comes to time travel stuff. You might be thinking, okay, if the goal is to create a paradox so I can get back in time, what if I just kill Sentius? If you try to do this, he kind of freaks out. He's like, what the hell are you doing?
As you would think naturally someone would do.
It forces you to put your weapon down. But you can try it again. And if you kill him, it does create a paradox. That's how you get ending number 1. It's the bad ending. It boots you out of the loop. You tell Al about what happens. And he said, okay, so you created the paradox just so we could both die here. And he gets very angry with you. Yeah, kind of a bad ending. Literally the bad ending. Not a good ending, though.
It is the worst.
This game, from here, it's not linear. You are going to be doing a series of little quests and tasks around town to figure out the game. So the way that I think we should approach this is we're just going to talk non-linearly about the different characters and quests that we thought were good, maybe that we didn't think were so good, but it's going to be more freeform. Lucretia is the first one that Sentius points us to. We could always start there if you'd like.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay. So Sentius, says you should check this out. If you go into the Shrine of Apollo, Lucretia is there, and there's a dead woman named Yulia next to her. We learned that Lucretia is not the actual medic. This woman named Naevia is. But, one day she up and left. We'll learn more about her soon. This woman next to us was poisoned, and she tried to get a cure, Lucretia did, but the person that had the cure in the town, Decius, was price gouging. He said, if you want to save her life, 1,000 denarii. She couldn't afford it. Decius said, well, that's the price of business, supply and demand and all that. So she died. Yulia died. And she said, I can't let this happen again. If it does, I will break the golden rule and kill him. I don't know about you, man, but one thing that I thought immediately was, okay, price gouging does not fall under sin here. Things are maybe not as we would expect.
Yeah, they're not as clear cut, because when you first hear don't sin and everything's going to be fine, you think of the big ones. You think of, well, you don't murder someone, you don't rob someone, those types of things. Well, wouldn't causing the death of someone by price gouging them equate to a sin? But no, not in this situation.
This is perhaps more timely than I was expecting. This is kind of akin to murder, holding life-saving medical aid from somebody due to cost. Sure sounds like murder to me.
Yeah, same here.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the first thing that I thought when I was playing this was, well, wait a second. If he withheld the cure, then he killed the person. He allowed the person to come to the state of death. So how is that not a sin?
This also kind of rules out suicide too, because you would assume that that's one of the big ones. You would assume, anyway. This kind of gives you your first quest. You could speak with Decius. Decius has the cure. What did you think of Decius?
He was very much one of the key actors in our society today. He's all about, what kind of situation, what can I make from this situation? How can I make this work for me?
He sure does love money.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very much materialistic and wants you to know it. Wants you to basically, hey, yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to do. And you can live with it or not.
If you ask him about his background, he'll tell you, like in his origin story, there was a flood, and he had to choose between his stuff or his living slave girl, like a human being, and he chose the stuff, and he's not remorseful about it at all. He's like, I could always just buy another. He's that kind of He's that kind of scumbag. But he does the same song and dance with you. If you want the cure, 1,000 denarii, that's just supply and demand. Those are the rules. Don't hate the player, hate the game. And this is where you hear that whispering voice come back, and it says to steal it. And then you can tell him, like, what if I just take it? And he's like, well, that would break the golden rule. You're not going to do that. But the voice says, like, whispers to you, steal it and run. So you do. You grab it. And that's when, or at least for me, that's when you hear for the first time the screen goes grayscale, and you hear a booming voice say,
The many shall suffer for the sins of the one.
And the whispering voice tells you to follow Sentius, and your objective updates too. Some of the statues come to life, and they take out bows and arrows and start shooting everybody, including you. They're turning everybody to gold. This is what happens. At least canon. You can take a couple hits because it's a video game. This is what introduces us to the loop. You have to run back to Sentius. He casts the spell. He dies. He gets vaporized, actually. And you jump into the portal, and you're right back at the Shrine of Persephone from the beginning, talking to Galerius. What did you think about this? When I hit this point, I was like, okay, I know exactly what to do in this game now.
Yeah, same here. Like you said, once you steal it, you get back to Galerius, and you figure out that what you kept on your body, you get to take to the next loop. Which is interesting sometimes what you can grab and just keep in your loot for.
Yeah, I don't remember do you remember how the game tells you about this? I don't remember how I figured this out.
I think I just checked. I'm not sure. I think I grabbed the poison and thought I grabbed it before I went through the portal, so maybe I still have it, and I realized then that I did.
I think maybe the quest updates automatically. Maybe you just get new dialogue options.
That's possible.
But you are right. Like anything you take from one loop will go into the next. That's how you can get a lot of money. You can, if you wanted to, get multiple quest items. It's an important mechanic because you're going to be doing that. The loop happens. You speak to Galerius again, and you can tell him, "Hey, we've had this conversation before." Funny enough, Galerius, like, he's kind of incredulous at first, nonplussed, but he just kind of believes you. He's like, well, okay, like, you tell him about the time loop, and he says, like, you must be like King Sisyphus or Ixion, like all these myths of, who was it? Sisyphus, Hercules, Orpheus, Aeneas, and Theseus that escaped the underworld. I think those are the five. And he says, you must be like all of them, and, what a day you must be having. But he believes you. He's just a good guy. He trusts you. This is where you had mentioned that mechanic. Do you want to talk about the Galerius mechanic?
Okay, so Galerius basically saves you so much time in this game because there's a lot of tasks, and you have to complete these tasks in order to open up new tasks. So you would think, I'm going through a time loop, I'm going to have to do a bunch of these things again. But no, the great thing about it is once you get to Galerius and you explain, hey, I'm in a time loop, you then get options to tell him, like, hey, take this cure to Lucretia, or to cure the poison. And he's just like, okay, I'll go do that. And he actually is running around the map doing these things. Mm-hmm. You can, I did it a few times where I would send him off to do something and just follow him. He actually is informing these people that, hey, you need this cure.
Yeah, voiced lines and everything. Like, he says to them what's going on.
Yeah. So that was really cool. But it saves you so much time. You can tell him multiple things to do as well. So it's not like just that one task. You can tell him to do a set of tasks, which you're going to have to by the end of the game. And he just goes and does it all. And then you can work on your next little path of your loop.
I'm not going to be the one to do it, but I can see an argument being made that this kind of breaks the fiction. I can see it. To me, it feels more like a positive quality of life improvement. So you don't have to do these same things over and over again, because what you will learn eventually probably is that you are technically on a time limit. Once evening comes, the election is held. One thing that you learn is that Sentius is running against somebody named Malleolus, who is a bit of a scumbag. He's sending a gladiator, his personal guard around town named Domitius, to pressure people into voting for him, kind of like a thug. And if Malleolus wins the election, which he will by default, his first decree is to say the golden rule is no more, and he immediately has Domitius fight Sentius, and it immediately breaks the golden rule, like in a gladiator match, to the death. It breaks the golden rule, and the loop starts again. So that's your cue. Like, if the election starts and you haven't figured out how to get Malleolus to lose, you have to start over, basically. So that's when Galerius, you could just be like, hey, I don't have a lot of time, but I need you to do this stuff for me. And he's like, oh, okay. And then, he does it.
It makes it so much easier. Another one of the characters that I did want to mention as I was looking through here, my favorite quest of the game was the assassin quest.
Oh, okay.
I love that one. It made me laugh each time it happened. But you meet this lady, she grabs your attention, and she wants you to know that there's an assassin at the front gate. Well, you can go to the front gate, and this guy's there, and you're like, hey, if you kill anybody, it's going to break the golden rule. It's going to turn everybody into gold. Well, this guy's an assassin. He's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't care.
What I love about this guy, too, is that he accuses you all of being in a cult. He's looking for somebody named Quinctus on the orders of Emperor Nero of Rome. He has to kill Quinctus, and Quinctus is here. And he's like, I know he's here. He's in that cult. And you could be like, no. We're forced to be here. And if we try to leave, we all die. And the assassin's like, yeah, that's what a cult is. You're in a cult.
Yeah. I forgot about that, but that's great. Yeah.
I like the voice performance too. Like he sounds so menacing.
I am here with orders from Emperor Nero himself to find and execute the cultist Quinctius for terrible crimes against the Empire. So, if you tell me the truth, I will allow you to live. But if you lie to me or otherwise obstruct the Emperor's business in any way, I will put this arrow through your chest. Is that understood?
He's one of the really good ones. But yeah, you have to figure out how to deal with this assassin.
The way that I think you're supposed to is before you greet him, that woman Claudia that you mentioned, she runs into a nearby shrine to like hide this out. She's all shaken up. I mean, of course she is. Because not only will this guy kill people, but it's going to kill everybody. Golden rule. So she hides in a shrine. The shrine collapses. She dies. A Greek fella named Georgius, who is her best friend, runs out. Did you watch, you're a little bit older than me. Did you watch Hey Arnold at all when it was on?
Yeah.
Georgius to me sounds identical to Oscar Kokoschka in a few scenes. And here he's like, oh no, Claudia. He sounds just like Oscar Kokoschka.
Oh no.
But what happens is, you know, the first time you meet this assassin, it's going to reset the loop. He's going to kill you. That's probably what's going to happen. So then the loop resets. And when he comes again and says, you know, where's Quinctius? You don't know anybody by that name. So you can say, oh, he's up in the shrine. And he walks in, the assassin does very slowly, and it collapses on him and he dies. This is also how you get a bow. You can loot his belongings. You can get his bounty letter, a couple denarii, and his bow. And the bow is really important because it opens up new quests. Like everything is connected into each other. It's really, really well done.
Yeah, it's very connected. This also points out another morality issue because you're the one who sends the assassin to his death. You know exactly what's going to happen when he enters the shrine. How did you not cause it? How is it not a causal relationship there that you send by sending him?
Is it moral to send to death one that would murder? That's a big question.
Well, but if you try killing the assassin,
yep, you break the golden rule.
You break the golden rule. So you're trying to eliminate the harm that the assassin would bring. So is it okay to kill a murderer?
If you pick the soldier background and have the gun, he threatens to kill you. You can say, like, the dialogue gets a little bit, what's the word? Not quirky, but it gets a little punchy. And you could say something like, yeah, I don't think you're going to like this. Or like, hey, check this out. And you can pull out your gun. And like you said, if you shoot him, the golden rule happens and the loop has to be reset. I mean, so that kind of answers that question. I mean, you can't outright murder a murderer, but I guess sending him to the shrine doesn't count? Fascinating. But that's how you get the bow. That's the assassin quest. Also, when this reloops, you can tell Claudia not to go in there, and she listens to you that time. The first time, the voice will whisper and say, like, no, and you can be like, did you hear that, Claudia? And she'll be like, no. And then you're like, oh, okay. And that's how she dies. But yeah, so that's that quest. That bow is important for Decius's quest. Once he sees you with that bow, he comes up to you, and Decius is a man that lives and breathes hubris, man. He comes up to you and he's like, hey, I don't know if you've heard about this Aesop fella. He's over there writing some fables. He's a smart guy. He talks about this golden goose. Have you heard of this? We could have infinite riches, man. Infinite riches. And if we split it, if you and me team up, half of infinite, that's still infinite. He says this very deliberately. His plan is that he's going to take your bow, wrap it in fake gold, and have you go into the shrine of Diana, aka Artemis, I believe.
Yeah, Artemis.
The shrine of Diana, to swap out the bow. Now, it's not theft because you're going to extinguish the fires in the temple so it's in the dark so the gods can't see you. This sounds hilarious. It turns out this is spot on the money correct, which I love that on a replay. But he wants to do this because he has this hunch that the arrows are what turn people to gold. He knows mythology. He knows all about this. And you can't really tell him no. Like you go along with this. What ends up happening is if you try to steal it with the lights on, that's it. You're locked in there. They kill you. But if you extinguish the lights, you swap out the bows, he locks you in there And he says, okay, now slide it under the door. I'm going to take it. You're just going to stay in there. And he's being a scumbag. And then he says, no, I never said that I would split it with you. I said, what if? It's not my fault you can't understand a hypothetical. There's no law against that. That's your own mistake. Tough luck, pal. And this is where the voice whispers to you again. They say, like, shoot the hornet's nest. There's a hornet's nest above. You shoot it, it falls, and you get to go through this underground tunnel that lets you out. This also gets you the golden bow, which turns things to gold. Turns out that's a really important mechanic. It can turn algae on the water into gold. Platforming can turn vines into gold. Good stuff. It's an important weapon. You need this.
I found on my playthrough, sometimes turning vines into gold just was not working.
Oh, is this the bug you mentioned?
This is one of the bugs that I had. I would shoot at the vines and they just wouldn't turn. And then I'd move like a foot forward, shoot it again, and it would turn.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on, if it was just my game or how I was playing it, but it didn't break anything because they would turn, but it was annoying.
Fascinating. I didn't have that happen, I don't think. Comes down to finickiness,
Yeah.
Who do you want to talk about next?
Well, we can go with one of the sections where I got my glitch, where I accidentally got an ending.
Okay. Which section was that?
So there's a section where you have to get into an underground bunker-like area, the basement area, and I went up to talk to the guard that's standing in front of that door, and for some reason when I went to talk, I phased through him and ended up in the underground section and was able to get one of the endings there, which was weird.
One of the endings with Sentia?
Yes.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Let's talk about that. So right early on, you can talk to Sentius's daughter, Scintilla. She'll tell you that Sentia has gone missing. Scintilla is a firecracker. She's really mean. She is. In a way that like only young women can be. That's maybe unfair to say. She's kind of mean. She's also very pretty. And she'll tell you, like, yeah, my younger daughter, Sentia is missing. Nobody knows what's happened to her. The golden rule hasn't been broken, but she's gone. We don't know what's going on. So it starts this quest where you have to find her. You can learn that she had a lover, which did not make Sentius very happy. He was, Roman rule. Roman fathers would marry off their daughters. I am going to get this so mixed up. Sentia, the older sister, is really against this. She's like, yeah, no wonder he doesn't care. He just lost like a dowry or whatever. But you go to look for her. Turns out she's inside of the cistern, which Sentius will not give you access to. And that's the door that you phased into.
Yeah, the cistern. Okay, yes.
It's funny you say that. Like, if you try to go into there, Domitius, the gladiator guard, will talk to you and he'll say, you shouldn't go in there. I saw something in there, something like some kind of a creature over the body of a man. You shouldn't go in there. And I told him, okay, I won't go in there. And then I just immediately went in. He doesn't stop you.
Well, my thing was I didn't even get that chance. So I didn't know how much of the game I missed by just phasing through him and going through it. But yeah, I didn't even get to talk to him. I just went up to him, clicked the button to talk, and here I just passed through him like I was a ghost.
You do learn that she's being kept under there. I actually didn't figure this out my first run. I did not know anything about this. You learn that Sentius is keeping her down there. Let's maybe put a pin in this for just a moment, because that kind of gets into like why the loop is happening. Let's talk about Equitia real quick. Equitia is the Vestal priestess, and there's a really nice subplot of like Galerius having a crush on her, and like she kind of feels the same way, but she's a priestess, and you have to get a flower for her through the most insufferable zip lining I have ever tried. It's like zip lining plus platforming. It sucks. Oh my God, this took me like a solid 15 minutes.
Yeah, the amount of times that you have to go up to that zip line and go down, and then you fall.
Oh my gosh.
And you don't follow where you need to go.
Yeah. This game shines on dialogue mechanics, not so much.
No.
But Equitia you can talk to her. There's a very funny line where like you could talk to her about memes or something. It's funny. Screenshots everywhere. But you talk to her and you can ask her about herself, and she asks about you, and you tell her like, yeah, I came here through a loop. Some woman in a boat dragged me onto the land, and she goes, huh? She wearing a hood? And you go, well, yeah. How would you know that? She was wearing a hoodie. And she's like, huh? What was her name? And you say Karen, and she goes, Karen, huh? Huh? What do you know about everybody else and how they got here? And if you haven't figured that out, she tells you to go talk to everybody. You could tell them like, yeah, everybody came here. They washed up on the river. They don't remember. They had this coin. And she goes, huh? I think you need to follow me. She walks you into the baths, and she says, take a look at this mural. And it's a mural of the river Styx and the ferryman Charon, Charon. And she's like, you didn't mishear the name. It's just a different spelling. That's Charon as in Charon the ferryman. I suspect that we're all dead. And that's the twist of it's one of the twists of the game, is that we are in the underworld. Everybody here is dead. We've been brought here by the ferryman Charon. This got revealed to me within the first 25-30 minutes, which I don't know, man. I felt like that was a little too soon.
Yeah, and like I said, that goes with this game kind of being overly forceful with the narrative. They want you to understand these things, so you can get in a situation where you figured everything out within the first half hour, and you still have 15 to 20 hours left of the game that you have to go through.
Yeah, it's hard to call it a con, but it did deflate. I don't want to say it deflated the sales. It was a little jarring, is all. I expected this to be like the ending twist, because like we both said, we figured this out pretty quickly, right? It's, in retrospect, it's a little obvious what they're trying to do, but I did not expect to figure it out so quickly with so many more quests to go, No,
I totally get that critique on it. There are little nuances that they add throughout the game that make it interesting to keep playing, such as once you realize this world is built upon another world is built upon another world, going back throughout history. I don't know if you were ready to talk about that portion of it or not.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of other things I wanted to get into before we jump into that. That kind of gets into the end part of the game. Just a couple, though. Equitia will tell you all this, and she basically, she also tells you a bit about the myths of, Theseus and Sisyphus and Charon, if you're unfamiliar. And she says, there are two ways that we could get out of this, or that you can get out of this, because, you're not from here. You can either go to Persephone for help, Proserpina. If you don't know, Persephone in the Greek myth, and the Roman myth, Persephone and Proserpina, is kidnapped by Hades. She's stolen from her mother Demeter and taken down to be his bride. He kind of tricks her. He gives her a pomegranate seed. So then when she goes back to Demeter, the fact that she ate food of the underworld means she has to be there a third of her life, or a third of the year. That third of the year is autumn and winter. So that's the myth, is that's why the barrenness of winter happens, because when she's in the underworld, Demeter lets the earth go barren. It's very cool, man. I love this shit. I really do. But she says Persephone could help. She's not exactly fond of Hades. And Hades is the one doing this. Hades is the ruler of the underworld, after all. We could do it that way. Or we can confront him brute force, like Hercules. It's funny. She'll say, you're no Hercules. And you're like, yeah, well, Hercules couldn't turn people into gold and travel through time. And she's like, I don't know what you mean, but I believe you.
Yeah.
But that kind of... that's going to be how you win the game. You can either confront Hades, or you can use Persephone's guidance to sort of get out of there. So going back to what you had mentioned, you said you glitched into one of those endings. Ending 2 and 3 are achieved the same way. When you find Scintilla, chained up in the cistern, Sentius will come down. And he says somehow Sentius, being the one that cast the loop, says that he also retains memories across loops. I don't know about you, but when he said that, I was like, sure, okay.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but that's what I was talking about earlier. They kind of foreshadow that he's able to retain that knowledge through the loops where everybody else does not.
Yeah, and it's fine, you know. He cast it, so of course he does. Okay, sure. But he's behind this. He wants this to keep happening because he's grown accustomed to his position of power. He's like, we have it great here, you know. He's the one that brought Al in previously, and Al was here for like thousands and thousands of loops. He just wants to keep this up, and he's like, you know, you're not any different. You're gonna kill yourself too, and then I'll just bring somebody else in. You know, what do you think you can do? He's kind of gone mad with power.
Oh, I was just going to say, when it comes to Al, it's very clear that with how this spoon feeds what you're supposed to do, Al was very bad at trying to fix things. Very bad if it took him thousands of times.
yeah, he's he's not exactly using the thing between his ears that God gave him.
No.
But one way this loop can end is you or Scintilla can kill Sentius. I let Scintilla do it. She lights him on fire. It's pretty sweet. Or you can just untie her like immediately and just get out of there. Or wait, no. You can either do it that way and the two of you escape, or you can tell her like, hey, we have to get everybody and round everybody up. I'm going to come back in another loop with everybody, and then we're all going to escape. The other way to get to the ending is by confronting Hades. And to do that, you have to get into this temple. The only way to do that is to gather the 4 tablets that have been taken off of the obelisk. This really is functionally only 2 quests. One of them is not even a quest. One of them you just find in a hidden Christian shrine, the Roman tablet. You can get in there by platforming with the golden bow. That's pretty much it. The other 3, the Greek, the Egyptian, and the quote-unquote other like mystery tablet, they all come from the same quest, which I think we can skip for time. The only things that I wanted to mention on it was, 1, it has a Skyrim-ass dungeon that sucks. Like there's some combat. But 2, that philosopher conversation happens down there, which is a really fascinating little dialogue.
Yeah, and like you said, the combat in this game, it's awful. It is not good. I never understood why sometimes I would turn something to gold with 1 shot, and why sometimes it would take 2 and sometimes it would take 3. I never understood that because the enemies you're facing all seem to be roughly the same. So, yeah, it's not a good area.
The enemies, by the way, are the golden statues, but they've been peeled. There's a woman named Naevia that we mentioned briefly who heard the whispers that you hear. But she kind of falls in love with, she mistakes it for being one statue and falls in love with that statue. It's really horrific shit. Like, this is actually my favorite, like, quest in the game. Where you go into the temple and you see that she's been carrying out experiments on these statues, trying to, like, wake up this statue that she's fallen in love with. She's been peeling the gold off of them, but she realized that it's fused to their skin. So, like, you see these half-peeled statues, these bloody skeletons, blood everywhere. It's really, really horrific. You know, and she says that she feels like Pygmalion and Galatea. Pygmalion, the sculptor who fell in love with a beautiful statue and who, praying to Aphrodite, discovered that his beloved Galatea had come to life. It's a really, really cool.
It's really messed up.
It's very gruesome.
Oh my God. Because when you're thinking about it, all of these statues are alive, and she is taking them and ripping off their outer gold, which is their flesh. And the enemies, they'll fight you, but they want you to destroy them.
Yeah, they like will say, kill me, or when you shoot them and turn them to gold, they say thank you. They attack you basically to provoke you into killing them. They're not monsters. They're just, they crave death so bad.
Yeah. They've been going through this hell. All their flesh has been removed, and just for an experiment. And really horrifying.
Yeah, but those are the enemies you face. They're throughout here. You just turn them to gold, and that's kind of it.
And like I said, sometimes it takes 1 shot, sometimes it takes multiple, and you will never know why.
Yeah. When you're gathering these plaques, though, there's a reason that one is Roman, one's Egyptian, one is Greek. And it's because you're going through these ruins of the cities that the Romans have built over. And what you're learning is that everybody that has come before, one, had already built here, but two, had their own myths surrounding these gods. You know, throughout, I've been referring to Proserpina and Persephone. The Romans came after and assigned new names and sometimes new mythology to these gods. They saw Zeus and they said no, Jupiter. They saw Cronus, they said no, Saturn. They saw Hades and they said no, Pluto. Specifically with Hades, you see that here. You hear about, you know, Pluto, you hear about Hades, you hear about how the Sumerians called him Nergal. And that's important because once you get all of these plaques and put them back, you go into the temple, and the only way inside is to speak the name of the ruler. And depending on, there are 4 doors, and each door corresponds to one of the civilizations. So for the Roman civilization, you say Pluto, the god of the underworld. For the Greeks, it's Hades. For the Sumerians, it's Nergal, and I forget the name of the Egyptians. Osiris.
Yeah, Osiris.
Osiris.
And that is a very, very cool section when you go through it.
When
you talk speak the names.
It feels very climactic.
Yeah.
What I was not expecting is what comes next, though. And this is how you get the canon ending of the game. Inside, it looks like a spaceship.
Yeah.
Like white and blue, futuristic, like holographic, moving. It's crazy. And in front, there are 3 people. Charon, the hooded, now the hooded ferryman. Persephone, who is, for reasons the myth goes into and what we're going to learn just in a sec, is like kind of suspended. She can speak to you, but only you. And last but not least, Hades, the god of the underworld, is here. His eyes are kind of glowing blue the whole time. And this whole last section is trying to convince him to stop the golden rule.
Yeah, you're trying to speak logic to Hades, getting him to go back on what he's decided. He's basically of the idea that it works, we're not going to fix it. It did throw me for a loop when it was space. When I walked through that and it was like, okay, is this game Stargating me? I don't know if you've ever watched Stargate.
I have not.
Oh, no Stargate, no Hitchhiker's Guide. God.
I know, I'm slacking. It's not so much that he's saying that things are working. It's that, and some of this is real mythology. Some of this, I think, is made up for the game. But you get a lot of exposition here. He'll tell you about some of the myth. Like, in the myth, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades all take rule of the heavens, the oceans, and the underworld, respectively.
Yeah.
Hades kidnaps Persephone. What's happening here, Persephone, the gods abandoned humanity because they saw how lawless and barbaric we acted. Persephone did not agree with this. She saw potential. Persephone decided to forsake her godhood, her immortality, and joins the mortals to stay with them. Now, the reason this is a problem is because Hades loves her, and Zeus is very clear in his judgment that no mortals can go to Elysium, so she can't go back with the gods. Hades isn't going to go back. So, in the trickery fashion of the Greek gods, Zeus decides to give a wager. He says, okay, I will not only let her change back into a god, but I will invite all the mortals to Elysium. If the mortals can go 1 year without sin, you have to stay behind and watch them in silent judgment, but 1 year without sin, that's what it'll take. And the gist of it is, it never happened. To make it fair, he distributed Charon's obols randomly. So if you found one, you got brought to the afterlife. Here, no society did it. Every gold statue is from a previous society with sin. And this is the last loop. All the coins are accounted for except for 2 that coincidentally you and Al have. This is the last loop. Basically, Persephone lost the bet. Hades is kind of smug about it, but he's saying, like, let's just get it over with. humanity couldn't do it, you know? And this leads into a final like philosophical boss battle where you have to persuade him as to why the golden rule isn't a good thing. This one isn't like the philosopher. If you mess up here, he just says, okay, like, I'm tired of you, you're dead. And if that happens, you have to steal the crown of Persephone and then come back in another loop, show him it, which I didn't get that part because it surprises him. And he says, how do you have that? I don't know how he wouldn't know that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a bit hard to suspend disbelief there, wouldn't it? How? Yeah, you would think that he would know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. That's you get a achievement if you bully him into stopping the golden rule rather than persuading him. Pretty cool. But persuading him is interesting. I mean, you lay out some of the things that we talked about, like why isn't suicide considered a sin? And he says, well, it's do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. You're not doing anything unto others. You're doing it unto yourself. And that's autonomy. I fail to see how that's a sin. You say, okay, well, what about the price gouging? And he's like, well, I mean, I think that's exactly how he would expect others to do unto him. He's playing the game to win. And how can I find fault in that? And you're like, okay, what about debt bondsmen? There's a person that signs their labor over for 30 years. And he's like, okay, putting aside your moral superiority, what do people in your time do to get out of poverty? And you're like, well, they take out a loan. He's like, how long does that take to pay off? And you can say decades, sometimes the whole life. And he says, I fail to see how that's different then. He's making good points, is what we're saying.
It's very fun, the going back and forth with him like that, because, like Rick pointed out, he has some good answers, and they make you think about, well, yeah, why do I think that's more moral than that situation?
Some of them I don't buy, like, you know, the price gouging one, I don't really buy that, but, you know, it makes sense in what he's trying to say.
Well, and I think the suicide dialogue is pretty interesting because it kind of goes with a lot of talk today about should people be able to choose when they go and how that is autonomy. And it should be something it's very personal. So I liked that portion.
I totally agree with you. I disagree with that being categorized as a sin. You know, I agree. Yeah. I agree with Hades. I agree with the god of the underworld here. No, it is. I mean, do I think that life is incredibly sacred? Yes, I do. But that is autonomy, and calling that as a sin just really rubs me the wrong way. It always has.
Yeah.
It also rubs me the wrong way when you do that and you get arrested for it, like in the real world. That's barbaric to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, whether you bully him out of it or you talk him out of it, he agrees to let you out, and that kind of ends the loop. And it takes you out back onto the riverbank with Karen, and you can tell her, like, hey, I figured out who you are. And she says, okay, yeah, you got it. You and Al have the last coins. Like, this is it. I'm not going to have to ferry people anymore, which is interesting if you think about it in terms of the mythology. But she says, like, yeah, you know, you guys are the last two. You can ask how you got here. And she says, like, you were murdered. Like, you got jumped, and Al was there. He tried to help, but you both got killed. They had weapons. You didn't. You know, simple as that. And she says, you know, for everything you've done, like, I'm going to take you back. You know, I'm going to give you another chance. And if you've got the canon ending, not only do you go back with Al, but you go back to contemporary time with everybody you saved in the Roman village. And it's kind of cool. They're all back in contemporary clothing, like Horatius, the guardsman. He went into the National Guard. Scintilla, or there was a character named Virgil and Rufius who were both homosexual, which in that time in the Romans wasn't a big deal. Here, they're together. You know, everybody's integrating into society. You get to talk to everybody. They all thank you. You're worshipped as like basically a god now. You're called the Oracle. And at the very end, Al shows you that they've built a statue to you. So in addition to Theseus and Hercules and Aeneas and Orpheus and Sisyphus, there's also now you. You have now escaped the underworld as well. And you're kind of revered as this god. You know, you're written about. You are a figure of importance. And that's kind of how it ends. You know, it doesn't end with like any grand statement about philosophy. You know, again, this has a story, and this is how it ends. And, you know, it was a nice ending. It was maybe a little bit, a little too schmaltzy, but I liked it.
So I enjoyed the canon ending. I enjoyed it, but I found that the museum portion where you're walking along and talking to everyone, that got a bit long.
It highlights how many people are in the game.
Yeah. It's like, okay. Oh yeah, I remember you from that time I passed you a bunch of times. What's up? And they go on about what they've done since they left. I think Scintilla becomes like a fashion, something to do with fashion, doesn't she?
Yes. Or maybe that's Georgius, since he was the tailor. He goes into fashion too.
Yeah. I'm trying to think any standouts there. Like you did say there's the homosexual couple, which wasn't a big deal in Roman times, but this game kind of deals with the section of Roman to Christian times. So there is a quest line in the game that you have to follow to find that out.
It's very interesting. The person, somebody's harassing Virgil, who is an openly gay person. And he even says, like, you know, this isn't like a big deal in anywhere else that I've lived, but this new cult of Christians, like, they're very against it. And it turns out to be Rufius, who's really only harassing him because he has rheumatism and it's like making his life hell and he's always angry. And like that combined with having a crisis of faith, like being a gay man and a Christian, plus the rheumatism was just, he was lashing out. Once you give him the cure, he turns into a nice guy.
Yeah.
It's a total 180.
Yeah. And it's a touching moment there.
Oh, totally.
There's a few touching moments in the game. And I felt they did it well. I just, like I said, that the final ending, getting to the end portion where they tell you that you're up there with Sisyphus and stuff, that it takes a bit long. It's a long meander. And no one is in a hurry in this game.
Yes.
No one is ever in a hurry.
Yes, this ending section, whenever everybody has to take a second to turn towards the camera, you really start to notice it.
Okay, and I think that's it. I think that's the why I felt like, oh my God, as I was going through this ending is, and we mentioned it earlier, every time you go to talk to them, you have this fade in, and then the moment that they have to turn to look at the camera. It's not as obnoxious when it's only happening once in a while as you talk to people. It was very obnoxious when you were just talking to people in this museum section.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was a bit much. But that kind of closes out the game. That's the canon ending. You saved everybody. There was one person that I didn't find. I didn't find Scintilla on my playthrough at all. She still shows up. You just have a little dialogue about how, like, oh, I'm sorry that I didn't find you. But, you know, she says it's all right. Sentius isn't there because he was keeping Scintilla down there. He was keeping her prisoner, so he actually got turned to gold. He did not make it out. Neither did Malleolus. Or maybe he did, and then he just, like, wound up in a bad situation out here. I can't quite remember.
I don't remember what they said happened to Malleolus.
He did not meet a good fate. I just don't remember if it was in the real world or in the Forgotten City.
I seem to remember that there's like a throwaway line there about him meeting an unkind fate, but I'm blanking.
Yeah, that's all right. But that closes it out. I mean, that's the game. It's really fascinating. I had a really great time with this. I think this will be one of my favorite games I played this year for sure.
Oh, it's definitely, up there for me as well. It's definitely well worth the playthrough. If you like narrative-driven games, you got to check this out.
Yeah, co-signed. Absolutely. And it sparks these kinds of conversations about, you know, philosophy and history and, you know, looking at how we stand on and overwrite that which came before. It's really fascinating. And, you know, I think those conversations outside of the game are more important than, you know, talking about Scintilla or what happened to Malleolus, things like that. But that's the game. Yeah, easy recommend. It's never expensive. You know, not going to be a $40, $50 game. It was on Game Pass for a while.
If this had been released and it was a $40, $50 game, I don't know that I would fully recommend. But it's well worth the price that you'll pay.
Absolutely. And do check it out. It's very fun, very interesting. So with that, first of all, I got to thank you, Dog, for sticking around and having this conversation with me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate it.
I love this game. I love this game a lot. And I got to thank the listeners for sticking around too. So now, as always, Dog, you are up to some interesting things on the internet. You don't have a podcast.
I don't have a podcast yet. Maybe I will at some point. Everyone has to have one. But I think it's a rule now. But I may be checking into podcasting. But I'm on Twitch. I am on a hiatus right now. But I do plan on coming back sometime in the near future. I play a wide variety of games. I like horror games. Really like horror games. And that used to be my emphasis on my channel, but I've gone into more retro and adventure games and various things, so just variety streamer.
Yeah, before we had started, I was checking with you if your schedule's accurate. I don't use Twitch a whole lot, but I was checking with you if your schedule was accurate, and it had Oxenfree on it, which it's not horror, but it's like thriller, kinda.
Yeah, that I really enjoy a wide variety of games. There are games that I tend to want to have just to myself, like the Yakuza games where I didn't want to stream them. But if something hits my fancy, then I'll play it.
Absolutely. And I think folks should check it out. It's in the episode description. You can find that. And of course, Dog also has a Blue Sky that you can find. And in the episode description, you can also find links to all of our stuff, all of Pixel Project Radio's links to the Patreon. That's patreon.com/pixelprojectradio if you're a fan of the show. Links to our Discord server that's free to join, our Blue Sky, the rest of our social medias. You can find all of that inside. I got to thank Dog once again for sticking around to talk, and I want to thank you listeners for sticking around to listen. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to sign off for now. My name is Rick. I am your host. We'll catch you next time. Take care.